Chapter 1, Midnight at the Mansion by Stephen K. Smith. Book 5 of the Virginia Mysteries. Lunch was on Sam's mind as he walked with Caitlin past the black bear habitat. It was barely 10 in the morning, but he was regretting not refilling his cereal bowl at breakfast. Even so, he was glad not to be the black bear's lunch. He watched it stroll across a trickling stream, splashing at the water with a giant paw. Bears made Sam nervous, so he was glad when he and Caitlin moved on to the birds of prey area, another of the wild animal exhibits at Maymont, a former estate that now was a huge park in the city of Richmond. "You know what I don't like about Benjamin Franklin?" said Caitlin as they approached a large wooden sign shaped like a bird's nest. Sam raised an eyebrow. "What did Ben Franklin have to do with anything? His weird glasses?" Caitlin turned to Sam with a confused look. "I love his glasses." "Okay, what don't you like about Ben Franklin?" It was pointless to resist. Even though she was a girl, Caitlin was one of Sam's best friends in the whole 5th grade. She knew just about everything, but she also made sure you knew she knew it. "He wanted our national bird to be the turkey." Caitlin huffed, throwing up her arms like she'd witnessed some great injustice. Sam thought about that for a moment. "Not such a bad choice. I love turkey. In sandwiches, at Thanksgiving." His stomach rumbled again at the thought. Caitlin frowned. "Exactly. Something you eat is probably not appropriate for the national bird." Maybe she did have a point. They reached the open-air pen containing a pair of bald eagles. "Look at them," exclaimed Caitlin. "Aren't they amazing?" Sam nodded. They sure were. He couldn't stop staring at their sharp beaks and their white feathered heads. He'd seen pictures of bald eagles so many times on dollar bills and other United States symbols that they seemed common. But now, being only a few feet away from the real thing was pretty sweet. "See how intelligent they look? I wonder what they're thinking," said Caitlin. Sam's stomach grumbled loudly. Caitlin giggled. "I know what you're thinking." He frowned and squinted to get a better look through the mesh wire. A dart of brown in the corner of the cage caught his attention. "That one's probably thinking about how many seconds to wait until he eats that mouse. Not a very smart mouse to wander into an eagle's cage." "A mouse? Where?" Sam pointed over to the corner of the cage just as the eagle spread its great wings, and with a single flap, it swooped to the ground, grabbing the critter in its talons. "Ah!" shrieked Caitlin. "Wow," Sam muttered, excited by the action. "I think he heard us say mouse." "That's disgusting," said Caitlin, turning away. "Poor little mouse." "That's just what eagles eat," said Sam. "Just because something's true doesn't mean I need to think about it," she replied over her shoulder. "Gosh, you don't have to be so squeamish about it," answered Sam. He'd been so caught up in watching the eagle and the mouse that he hadn't noticed the man who had walked up beside them until now. "Quite something, aren't they?" the man said without taking his eyes off the birds. He was about Sam's dad age, and he wore glasses. A puff of black hair stuck out from under the bill of his brown baseball-style hat. Yeah, they are," Sam answered, realizing that the man was talking to them. He wasn't supposed to talk to strangers, but he also didn't want to be rude. He didn't know who this guy was, but he seemed okay. It wasn't like he was offering them candy or anything. The man turned and smiled at them. "The eagle has always been a symbol of strength, all the way back to Roman times." "It has?" said Caitlin. Sam chuckled. It wasn't often that Caitlin was caught not knowing a fact about something. The man nodded. "It became our national symbol back in 1782 when it was placed on the Great Seal. However, there were some who wanted a different bird." "Benjamin Franklin!" shouted Caitlin. She gave Sam a smug, grim, happy to show her knowledge off to someone else, especially a grown-up. "He wanted the turkey." "That's right," said the man. "Very impressive. You must be a bit of a historian yourself." Caitlin beamed. "I'd like to be." "She thinks she knows everything," added Sam. "Do you work here?" asked Caitlin, casting a frown at Sam. The man smiled. "Not exactly." He paused, seeming to consider his answer. "But I think of myself as someone on the side of history, too. Our resources, like the eagles, need to be protected, you know. It wasn't long ago that these beautiful creatures were nearly wiped out. There are only a few hundred pair of bald eagles left in the entire country, but laws were enacted to protect them, and now they're doing well again." "Thank goodness," said Caitlin. Sam nodded. He was glad the eagles were healthy again, but they were too cool to go extinct. The man's phone chirped on his belt. His expression changed when he glanced at the screen. Sam couldn't tell if it was worry or anger, but the man suddenly seemed nervous. "Kids, I gotta go. Nice meeting you. Be careful where you go today." He pulled the brim of his hat down closer to his eyes and quickly strode down the ramp from the bird exhibit. Sam watched him break into a jog as he turned the corner, following the trail toward the river that ran beside the park. "That was weird," said Caitlin. "Yeah, where do you think he ran off to?" It must have been something, he must have had something to do with the message he got on his phone. He seemed nice. He knew a lot about history. "Maybe he's a killer," said Sam. "Every time he scores another victim, he visits a bird of prey to be near other predators." Caitlin gave him a sideways glance and giggled. "You're crazy." She turned to leave. "You're starting to sound like Derek." "Hey, now that's an insult," yelled Sam. His older brother could be a little goofy sometimes, a real pain most other times. "Come on," said Caitlin. "We better go find that brothers of yours. No telling what he's up to." They followed a trail that led across the rolling lawn toward the old mansion at the top of the hill. According to Sam's mom, a millionaire couple named the Dooleys donated the mansion and the entire 100-acre estate to the city of Richmond when they died about 100 years ago. Sam hadn't been there before, but Maymont was one of Caitlin's favorite places. When she invited him and Derek, excitedly describing the trails, gardens, and wild animal exhibits, nature center, and the old mansion, it was hard to say no. They climbed the sloping trail, surrounded by tall trees, oaks or maples, or maybe sycamores. Caitlin would probably know, but he wasn't about to ask her. As they approached one group of trees, Sam heard a familiar voice call his name. He looked around, but he didn't see anyone. "Look up there." Caitlin pointed up into one of the tallest trees. Sure enough, Sam's brother Derek was perched on a large branch 40 feet in the air. He wore an orange helmet and a shoulder harness that was attached to a cable and pulley. Sam followed the wire down to the ground, where two guys were holding support ropes. The name on their shirts was that of the Outdoor Adventure Company in town. Caitlin waved up to Derek in the tree, and he was always wanting to climb or jump off something. Sam preferred to keep his feet closer to the ground. "Watch this!" Derek yelled, stepping off the branch while grasping a handle that attached to the zip line. The men on the ground shifted their weight and held the support ropes tight as Derek flew along the zip line until he reached the stopping mechanism at the bottom of the cable, and his feet gently touched down on the grass. Sam's stomach turned upside down just watching, but he tried not to let it show. He decided that the fewer people who knew about his fear of heights, the less he would be teased about it. "What do you think?" called Derek, unhooking himself for the ropes and harnesses. "Wow," said Caitlin. "That looks fun." "Nice job," said Sam. "I'll have to try that sometime," said Caitlin. "Is it scary?" Derek put on a confident face and smiled wide. "Piece of cake. It's fun, like flying." "Just for a few seconds," said Sam. "Long enough to be fun, little brother." He nudged Sam in the arm. "You can go next if you want." Sam shook his head and looked away. "That's okay." Derek laughed and turned to Caitlin. "Sam's a little bit chicken about heights." Sam felt his cheeks burn red. He slugged Derek in the shoulder. "Shut up. I am not. I just don't feel like it." Sam took a deep breath, trying to count to 10. That's what Mom told him to do, and Derek got him worked up, which was a lot. Caitlin rolled her eyes, and she walked across the grass toward a steep hill that sloped down behind the mansion. Staring down the hill. "Come on," she called over his shoulder. "I want to see the gardens." "That's a good idea," said Sam. I can go let the rope guys know you'll be back after you visit the chicken coop." "Sam," Derek cackled. Sam shot him an evil stare and started counting again. Staying relaxed around Derek was a full-time job. "What?" Derek laughed. "What did I say?" Caitlin led the way down a narrow stone path that cut through a grove of trees and the steep hill behind the mansion. The trail opened amongst an outcropping of large rocks that formed one side of a shaded garden. They all stopped and stared at a gentle water flow flowing over the rocks beside them. "Oh, I love this part," said Caitlin. "Wow," said Sam. He felt like he'd stepped into a picture from a magazine. This secluded section was like another world compared to the rest of the park. "What is this place?" "It's the Japanese garden." Caitlin walked onto a delicate wooden bridge that rose up into an arch. "It's so beautiful, isn't it? This is my favorite part of the estate." "Pretty cool," admitted Derek. They followed the narrow dirt paths through the manicured gardens until they came to a small pond. A gazebo-like structure sat at one end, and in the middle, A dozen round stepping stones connected to the opposite shore. Sam had never seen stones like these. They were flat on top and as big as truck tires. He stepped slowly from one to another, careful to keep a stone's distance behind Derek, just in case his brother had any ideas of pushing him in. As he reached the end of the stone bridge, one eye on Derek, a large orange streak moved past him in the water. What was that? He said a little bit more nervously than he would have liked. Caitlin smiled, pointing into the water. They're koi fish, Sam. It's a large Japanese koi pond. Derek bent over laughing. You should have seen your face. You thought you were a goner. They're a little small for a shark, Sam. I knew that, said Sam, brushing past his brother. He leapt onto the dirt path, looking back into the pond from the shore. The watermelon-sized fish were all through the water, some orange, some white, and others were a mix of both. While Sam was staring at the colorful fish, a commotion sounded from the hill by the mansion. He looked up to see a man running toward the pond at full speed. He leapt over a bush, plowing through the middle of the gardens in a huge hurry. He was heading directly toward Sam on the shore of the pond. Sam recognized him as the man they talked to by the eagle's nest. Sam dodged to his right to make way, but the man dodged the same direction and they crashed together, toppling onto the ground at the edge of the pond. I'll read chapter 2 of Midnight at the Mansion tomorrow.